Boreda, and thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Looking at the horizon for EdTech is an impossible task, but we can at least look at where technology has been, history informs us, and we're currently at a very much at a mobile area. It's mobile computing. If you ever come across an educational technologist that talks about the technology alone, they're on another planet. As Professor Di Laurillard, who was Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Technology at Open University, said in teaching as a design science in 2013, if you put technology first, learning is going to come second. So it's important to understand the influences around educational technology. And it's all about teaching and learning, but we'd be naive not to ask the question why. Why use educational technology? Well, there are political influences, and they really started in '63 with the Robbins Report, amalgamation, but a focus on students. We also saw that with the Deering Report in over 20 years ago now, chapter 13 that Professor Laurillard was actually behind. Was all about information technology and lifelong learning and higher education. Fast forward to 2011, and Student at the Heart of this System report from the government focused on the student as consumer. The Higher Ed Funding Council no longer held the balance of funding. It was about demand, and that had a huge impact. But nothing has had as big an impact as this year's announcements by Minister Johnson, Teaching Excellence Framework. Now, this is all about metrics. This is all about excellence in teaching. It's about engagement of students, addressing equity and retention issues, and importantly, teaching and research, that imbalance that many perceive. Now, of course, as part of the Russell Group, Cardiff has an outstanding research background. In fact, the UK punches well above its weight, with over 14% of the most highly cited papers globally. That's not an area that one really needs to address, particularly not in this area. Now, it doesn't surprise me, and I think we need to be empathetic to the fact that a number of academics have resisted some of the changes that have occurred because of this instructional efficiency that the government has pushed, fiscal concerns that the reports I've cited have impacted upon. And I think we need to understand that there will be pushback from many. In fact, in my experience at places like the University of Western Sydney, where there's currently over 43,000 tablet devices over the last few years, and I must say they're there as a trigger towards blended learning. Blended learning is certainly an important methodology and pedagogy on the horizon. Look, 10% of folks haven't even opened their devices. For philosophical or other reasons, we need to be empathetic and understand that. Unavoidable. We also have to ask, can technology actually assist teaching and learning? And I can't review all the literature here, but certainly the University of Washington paper in the Proceeds of the National Academy of Sciences a few years ago looked at active learning. And I think the bottom line I can look at is, out of 100 students, this paper tells us 34 will fail if lectured only, versus 24% if using active learning, blended learning, deliberate learning, these different pedagogies that technology can certainly enhance. I feel like I'm at a bit of an advantage when it comes to looking at the horizon, because I've been on the advisory panel of the Horizon Report in Australasia for 4 out of the last 6 years. And this uses a Delphi research methodology, a UK report as well, where 40-odd folks get together, typically Pro-Vice-Chancellors at education or e-learning experts, review the literature, look at the trends, look at the horizons for higher education and what's occurring. And in fact, if you look at the English-speaking horizon in the last few reports, there are some trends that are pretty damn obvious. Learning analytics is really important. Mobility and tablet computing is here and now, but in the future as well. Cloud computing and open content. In fact, I could talk about open research, the 2013 Finch report, but let's stay on task in these 10 minutes. The Horizon report this year looks at all geographies, so experts from the UK, US and elsewhere got together, and what they did was mapped trends in the short, mid and long term to technologies. And I've already mentioned blended learning is important. They see that as a short-term aspect in the horizon that's very important. So blended learning, like UWS, it's all about access to the material before the face-to-face learning, and this is proven to enhance teaching outcomes and, importantly, engagement. A number of folks like the med school at Lee Chong Kiang at Nanyang University, which is an Imperial College collaboration, interestingly, their students have access to all the material before their face-to-face small group learning, and then they go through a process to ensure that the core skills are there. Learning spaces, because of blended learning, are highly important. And there's been a lot of work on learning spaces. This is a very important area. And in the midterm, measuring learning or learning analytics is very important. OER, open educational resources, very important. So these are the sorts of technologies that are important in the horizon. Now, they were learning experts, IT experts within universities, represented by the EDUCAUSE group. And in collaboration with JISC, the Joint Information Systems Committee, this year came up with their top 10 issues. The ones that impact learning technologies are here on the screen. But it's all about teaching and learning with collaboration and using technology. It's about measuring again. So this is learning analytics, highly important. The architecture needs to be able to respond. So I think we need to be responsive. And bring your own devices, the cloud again, and mobility, proving to be very important. Now, if I focus on a couple of universities, Ohio State, nursing at University of Western Sydney, the med school at Manchester, health sciences at Adelaide, these folks are using technology to engage the students. If I look at science at Adelaide, this really reflects some important drivers. The executive dean saw that student retention was highly important, and after 4 years of handing every first year, every fresher a device, he's found that retention has indeed improved. He's also found motivation has increased, and importantly, he was driven by issues of equity, the costs of textbooks, and he found that's disappeared 4 years on because they now use open educational resources. And an interesting paper this year from Brigham Young in Michigan actually points out that students using OER texts are doing just as well, if not better, in their achievement. Manchester Metropolitan, engagement and collaboration. These are some trends that technology are highly important about. So they're using tablet devices and found that the students are more engaged and certainly collaborating a lot more in health science and social care. But staff are starting to use new teaching modes and their digital literacy is improving. Technology and assessment. So this is not just learning analytics, but folks like John Hattie from Melbourne Graduate School of Education tells us in his text Visible Learning, which is a meta-analysis of over 800 papers, that the more immediate the feedback, the higher the student achievement. We've seen some lovely examples. York St John use polling software, where students can give immediate feedback to staff who can then respond. Liverpool Dentistry have actually written their own qualitative assessment app that has driven their status and their rankings in the UK system much higher using formative assessment. We can't really predict the future, as we can hear from this expert.
So technology is a massive driver of change, and its consequences are completely unpredictable, and its course is unforeseen.
So Sir Ken Robinson, previously from Warwick University. Now, he talks about being able to predict the future being an issue. Well, we can at least look at the research not only around e-learning, but around technology to get an idea of the potential. Well, nanotechnology. Sir Harry Kroto from Florida, previously from Sussex, has done marvelous work, and he was a laureate in 96 from memory. Molecular computing, nanotechnology, logic gates for computers no longer just binary on-off, but actually stacked states, and molecular computing, quantum computing. The research that's occurring out there will impact teaching and learning down the line, but impossible to know where. What I do know is that there's been a lot of work in evaluating the critical success factors for e-learning projects. And it's about the appropriate adoption and integration of pedagogical models into technology. It's about formative feedback, as per John Hattie's comments. It's about not only having the pedagogical support, so the e-learning groups and so on, but the technological support. Those 43,000 iPads that are at University of Western Sydney would be a big flop if it wasn't for having the wireless infrastructure up to date. And look, I'd add buy-in from senior executive staff. We are at a very important juncture when it comes to educational technology. We can just do what we're doing now, but using technology, for example, instead of printouts, PDFs, and that's just substituting. Or we can attempt to transform education and higher education by using technology in creative ways that are transformative. Yes, it's disruptive. History tells us that. Walter Wrong wrote a text technologizing orality and literature, the technologizing of the world, which looks at all of the technologies and the impact they had, and they're all disruptive. Now that's 10 minutes, blended learning, mobile learning, learning spaces, learning analytics. These are some of the important trends that are there. Don't have time to look at all of them, but certainly if you want to follow up any of the citations I've made, or indeed some of the case studies I've mentioned, you'll find them linked to my website in the footer of each web page. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to having a chat as soon as possible. Cheers.